Hello and welcome to our quiet corner of the night. Tonight I'm going to tell you a story, a journey through time and nature, set in the heart of Brazil, where ancient rhythms of the forest and sea still beat strong. This story is about listening to the land, the tides, and the wisdom of those who came before us. It's about finding balance, patience, and calm in a changing world. So find a comfortable place, let your body relax, and breathe slowly as you listen. Allow yourself to drift gently into the world of Aruanã and the village of the tides, a place where time slows and peace flows like the ocean waves. Let's begin. Long before the roads, before the tall ships, before the names on maps, there was the forest. It stretched endlessly in all directions. A green ocean of branches, leaves, and birdsong. To those who lived within it, the forest was not just a place. It was a mother, a teacher, and a quiet friend who never raised her voice. The people who belonged to her knew how to listen. They didn't need clocks or pages or fences. They followed the trees, the sun, and the scent of the rain. And on this particular morning, still hidden in the early blue shadows before dawn, a boy named Aruanã woke to the sound of dew dripping from palm leaves outside his woven house. His name meant, the one who walks with the wind. And this morning, the wind had returned to wake him gently as it had many times before. Aruanã sat up slowly. His sleeping mat of soft bark cloth still held the warmth of the night. He could hear the forest breathing, the slow hum of insects, the rustle of capybaras foraging near the stream, the soft flutter of wings overhead. "Come, grandson," came a low voice by the doorway. It was his grandfather Iracema, a tall, calm man with white streaks in his hair and hands like carved stone. He was already holding his foraging basket and wore his tunic of cotton and woven beads. Today they were going into the forest to collect medicine. Without speaking, Aruanã rose and followed. They walked barefoot, quietly, so as not to disturb the dreams of the village. Chickens clucked gently in their sleep. Smoke from last night's fire still curled into the air. The moon was still visible, half hidden behind the leaves. The forest welcomed them. It always did. As they walked beneath the tall trees, shafts of golden light began to spill between the branches, soft as honey. Aruanã could smell the morning already, the deep, earthy scent of wet soil, mixed with flowers he didn't yet know by name. His grandfather walked ahead, slowly, deliberately, humming a song with no words. The tune was old, passed from voice to voice over many seasons. They stopped near a tall tree with peeling bark. Its branches curled upward like open arms. Iracema knelt by its roots and touched the earth. "Jatoba," he whispered. Aruanã repeated softly, "Jatoba." "It's good for the lungs," his grandfather said, "and for dreams." He showed Aruanã how to gather only what was needed, just one strip of bark, peeled gently with a stone blade, and only from one side of the tree. "Always leave more than you take," Iracema said. They continued their walk. They passed thick vines where monkeys played, and clearings where butterflies danced in lazy spirals. A toucan hopped along a low branch, tilting its bright beak with curiosity. Somewhere far off, a howler monkey called out to the morning. But nothing was rushed. Every few steps they stopped. Iracema would crouch, pick up a leaf, crush it between his fingers, and let Aruanã smell its strength. "This one is for fever. That one helps when your belly complains." Aruanã listened, nodded, and memorized the scent, the shape, the color of each plant. The forest was full of lessons. They just had to walk slowly enough to hear them. As the sun rose higher, they found a stream, a narrow ribbon of clear water winding between stones. Iracema cupped his hands and drank. Aruanã followed. The water tasted cold and clean. Sweet almost. Iracema sat down on a flat rock and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in woven leaves. Inside was cassava bread, dried fish, and a few slices of sweet fruit. They ate together, watching the water move. No one spoke for a while. There was no need. The forest spoke enough. A small lizard climbed onto a rock nearby, warming itself in the sun. A butterfly landed on Aruanã's knee and stayed there for 3 long breaths before floating away. "Your father used to come here when he was your age," Iracema said at last. "He liked to listen to the trees." "Did they speak to him?" Aruanã asked. Iracema smiled, not quite answering. "They speak to those who are quiet," he said. Aruanã didn't ask more. He knew that in the forest the best way to understand was to wait and listen. As the day warmed, they walked back with their baskets half full. The weight was just enough. Never more. The plants would be dried and stored in clay pots back home. Later, Aruanã's mother would brew them into teas for healing, or crush them into powders for soothing wounds. At the edge of the village they paused. The houses, made of wood and leaves, shimmered gently under the sun. Children were waking. Smoke rose from the cooking huts. A dog barked once, then lay down again. Iracema turned to his grandson. "The forest is your teacher," he said. "It remembers everything. So listen well and walk with care." Aruanã nodded. As they stepped back into the village, the forest behind them gave one final sigh of wind through its canopy, as if in farewell. But Aruanã knew it wasn't a goodbye. It was an invitation to return. And he would. Again and again. Because he belonged to the forest. And the forest, quiet, breathing, eternal, belonged to him. The river always spoke in its own voice. Sometimes it murmured gently over smooth stones, like a grandmother telling a story. Other times it whispered under the cover of reeds, shy and slow. But when the rains came and the sky darkened, the river could rise and rumble like thunder, strong and deep, reminding all who lived near it that it was very much alive. Aruanã had learned to respect the river long before he ever set foot in a canoe. And today he would finally help shape one. The sun had barely begun to climb when Aruanã left his village with his uncle, Caiubi. They carried nothing but a small bag of food, a flint blade, and a few strips of smoked fish. The path to the canoe maker's village followed the river's curve, shaded by tall trees whose leaves still dripped with morning mist. Birds flew in lazy loops above them. The cries of macaws echoed in the distance. And beneath their feet, the earth was soft and damp, giving a little with every step. "You must always greet the water," Caiubi said, slowing his walk. "It remembers those who forget it." At the bank of the river, Caiubi placed a hand on his heart and bowed gently. Aruanã did the same, watching the current swirl past their ankles. The canoe maker's village sat just beyond a bend, where the river widened and flowed like a sheet of glass. Long houses lined the bank, their thatched roofs blending with the trees. Canoes, some old and worn, others smooth and new, rested upside down on wooden racks, their shadows dancing in the water below. A fire burned low near the center of the village. Smoke rose in thin lines. Children played with sticks in the shallows, laughing as tiny fish darted around their feet. And beneath a tall ceiba tree, seated cross-legged beside a long trunk of andira wood, was a juricaba, the canoe maker. His hands were blackened with soot and resin, his face calm and focused. He was shaping the inside of the trunk, carving it slowly, carefully, as if revealing something already hidden inside. He looked up as they approached and smiled. "Caiubi," he said. "And this is your nephew?" "Aruanã," Caiubi replied. "He wishes to learn." A juricaba nodded once. "Then he must listen more than he speaks." Aruanã bowed silently. The canoe maker gestured for him to sit beside him. And without another word they began. The trunk had been cut many moons ago, chosen from a tall tree that had stood at the forest's edge. The elders had sung to the tree before felling it. A gift must never be taken in silence. Now the canoe was taking shape. Ajuricaba handed Aruanã a smooth stone scraper and showed him how to slide it gently along the inside of the hollowed trunk. "Not too hard," he said. "Let the wood show you its path." At first, Aruanã's movements were too sharp. He scraped unevenly and the sound was rough. But with each breath he slowed. He listened to the rasp of stone against wood. He watched how Ajuricaba's hands moved, like water, like wind, like time itself. They worked quietly side by side. The air was rich with the scent of wood smoke and resin. A pot of root tea simmered nearby, bubbling gently. Hours passed, though Aruanã didn't notice. The canoe began to open its arms, wider and smoother with every pass of the blade. At midday they rested under the shade of the ceiba tree. Ajuricaba passed Aruanã a piece of cassava bread and a slice of mango. "Do you know why the canoe matters?" Ajuricaba asked. "To cross the river?" Aruanã guessed. The canoe maker shook his head softly. "It carries more than people," he said. "It carries stories. It carries trade. It carries silence." Aruanã looked at the half-shaped canoe beside them. "Every one I make has its own journey," Ajuricaba said. "Some stay close. Some follow the river to the great water. I never know where they'll go. But I shape them with care as if I'll ride them myself." He poured tea into a gourd and handed it to Aruanã. "Even when I'm gone, my hands will still be floating somewhere, carried by the current." In the afternoon, they lined the inside of the canoe with glowing coals. This was the part Aruanã had waited for, the fire shaping. Ajuricaba placed the embers carefully inside the canoe and used a small fan of leaves to spread the heat. The wood groaned and softened like it was stretching after sleep. Slowly the sides of the canoe widened, curved open, reshaped by fire. Aruanã watched, fascinated, as steam curled from the wet bark. Ajuricaba moved like a dancer, cooling, scraping, fanning, checking. "Fire is a teacher," he said. "But it doesn't shout. It speaks in warmth. It opens the body of the tree." By sunset the canoe was smooth and ready. It lay beside the river, still warm to the touch. The village gathered near the water to see it. Children touched its sides and whispered. An elder tied 2 feathers to the front, a symbol of safe passage. Aruanã stood by Ajuricaba, tired but full of quiet pride. The canoe would not sail that night, it needed to rest and dry. But already it felt alive, ready to carry dreams and fish and laughter. That evening, as fireflies rose from the reeds and the stars peeked through the trees, Ajuricaba sat beside Aruanã and pointed at the river. "When the sky falls, the water catches it," he said. "And when we sleep, the water remembers." They said no more. The moon cast a silver path across the water. The canoe, newly born, rested in the glow. Aruanã closed his eyes and listened, not to words but to the hush of the river, the whisper of the trees, and the breath of the forest. The canoe would sail soon. And Aruanã would remember every moment it took to shape it. Because some things are made not just with hands, but with time and patience and peace. The sun had only just stretched its fingers over the treetops when Aruanã stepped onto the sand. The forest behind him whispered farewell, but ahead, everything was quiet, wide and open. The air smelled of salt and warm earth. There were no thick trees here. Only low bushes, tall grasses, and the shimmering stretch of sea just beyond the rise of a hill. This was a different world. Aruanã had followed the river eastward for 2 days, guided by his uncle Cayubi and 2 fishermen who knew the coastal trails. They had slept under stars, listening to crickets and the call of night birds. And now at last they had arrived at the place Cayubi called Ticomar, the village by the sea. But Aruanã wasn't here just to see the ocean. He was here to visit the Sambuca, a mountain made not of stone or earth, but of shells. thousands upon thousands of shells. Some small and white, some large and pink, some cracked, some smooth as river pebbles. Layer upon layer, built up over time by hands long gone. A place of the ancestors. They climbed a short hill and there it was. A mound, tall and round and bright beneath the morning sun. Its sides glistened with the soft colors of broken shells. Crabs scuttled at the base. A pair of white birds stood at the top, still as carved figures. Aruanã blinked. He had never seen anything like it. Caiubi placed a hand on his shoulder. Before our people came here, he said, there were others. Many seasons ago. They lived by the tide. They fished, they cooked, they built, and they placed their dead in the shell mounds. This is where their spirits rest. Aruanã stepped closer. The air felt different here. He couldn't say how. Just slower. Thicker. Like even the wind was remembering something. A woman approached from the edge of the dunes. She wore a skirt made of woven grasses and beads around her wrists. Her hair was long and gray and her face, though wrinkled, was warm with kindness. This is Uranã, Caiubi said. She is the guardian of the mound. Uranã smiled and nodded gently to Aruanã. Would you like to help me feed the ancestors? She asked. Aruanã's eyes widened. He looked to Caiubi, who gave a small nod. Uranã led him to a round stone bowl near the base of the sambuca. It was filled with cooked fish, crushed manioc, and fresh fruit. She took a pinch of each and laid it carefully on a flat stone nearby, whispering softly. They no longer eat, she said, but they still receive. Aruanã mimicked her movements, laying the food gently without rush. A small breeze lifted his hair. A bird cried overhead. Did they build this all with shells? He asked. Uranã nodded. They ate from the sea, she said. And they placed what was left, shells, bones, earth, in this one place. They returned it to the land, slowly, over many lifetimes. She motioned for him to sit beside her on the mound's slope. They didn't write with charcoal or clay, she said. This was their story. A rising hill made by hands. A song of patience. The sky was wide and blue above them. The sea shimmered like melted glass. Waves moved gently to the shore, not crashing, just arriving and leaving like breath. Uranã picked up a small shell and handed it to Aruanã. Hold it to your ear, she said. He did. At first, all he heard was the echo of air, like a long sigh. But slowly it became more, a hush, a hum, a memory of water. Of nights by fire. Of fish pulled from nets. Of voices long faded. Every shell remembers, she whispered. They sat for a long time saying little. Later, Uranã led him to a deeper part of the mound, where flat stones marked the resting places of those who had passed. There were no names, only shapes. Circles. Spirals. Lines like waves. These are the oldest ones, she said. They saw the moon before our grandfathers were born. They fished without boats. They lived by light and tide. Aruanã touched one of the stones. It was warm from the sun. He closed his eyes. He pictured someone sitting here long ago, a woman with braided hair, grinding shellfish by the fire, laughing with her children. Maybe she had watched the same stars Aruanã watched. Maybe her feet had touched the same sand. The sambuca had no walls. No guards. No gate. But it felt like a temple. A temple of time. That evening, the village gathered near the base of the shell mound. A small fire burned, and people sat in a circle, old and young, women and men, all listening as Uranã told one of the old stories. It was about a boy who followed a turtle deep into the sea and returned with songs in his breath. The words were slow, like a tide rolling in. No one interrupted. Even the children listened. Aruanã felt something rise in his chest. Not excitement, not fear, but stillness. When the fire dimmed, Uranã handed him a handful of crushed shells. Return them to the mound, she said. Let your day become part of its story. He walked up the slope, knelt and sprinkled the pieces gently onto the mound. The sound was soft, like dry rain, like memory. Below, the village lights flickered. The ocean sighed. Above, the stars came one by one. Aruanã didn't speak as he walked back to his sleeping mat. He lay down beneath a woven roof, the sound of waves in his ears. He held the shell Urana had given him. It was small and pale, with a single swirl at the center. He held it to his ear one last time. The sea whispered. The shells remembered. And Aruanã slept. By now, Aruanã had walked many days from his home. He had followed the river to the sea, stood upon a mound built by time, and watched the moon rise over the ocean like a pearl in the sky. But today his feet turned inward, away from the coast into the thick, breathing heart of the forest. The air grew cooler, greener, softer. Birdsong came not from above but from all directions. Ferns the size of men lined the trail. Thick roots curved like sleeping snakes across the path. Light fell in golden patches through the treetops, as if the forest had stitched holes into the sky. Aruanã was not alone. At his side walked a quiet man named Tupiniquim, a respected elder known throughout the region as a Cariba, a spiritual healer, a speaker of dreams. Tupiniquim spoke little. His tunic was stained with the dust of herbs and the soot of old fires. His hair was bound in a coil, and around his neck hung beads carved from bone, wood, and shell. He walked barefoot, not out of poverty but out of respect for the earth that carried him. They were on their way to visit a creature older than stories. Aruanã had heard whispers in the villages about the great tortoise, a being that lived deep in the forest, said to have seen the birth of rivers and the first footprints of humans. It was not a pet, not a symbol. Just an old soul respected for its patience. Why the tortoise? Aruanã had asked earlier. Tupiniquim had replied only, because it remembers. Now, after hours of walking in silence, they reached a clearing. And there, resting near a slow-moving stream, half-shadowed by a grove of banana trees, was the tortoise. It was unlike any animal Aruanã had ever seen, broad-backed and ancient. Its shell was marked with moss and tiny scratches, as if it had been carved by rain. Its legs were thick and heavy but still graceful. Its eyes, small and dark, blinked slowly without fear. Tupiniquim knelt in the grass. Aruanã followed. They sat. For a long time no one spoke. The tortoise did not move. Time passed gently. The wind touched the leaves then left. A butterfly landed on the tortoise's shell. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker knocked softly against a hollow tree. At last, Tupiniquim whispered, "This one has lived longer than I have dreamed." Aruanã looked at the tortoise again, seeing it not as a creature, but as part of the forest itself. Like a boulder that had learned to breathe. "Is it a spirit?" he asked. Tupiniquim smiled without answering. Instead, he opened a pouch and took out a few leaves, bright green and wide. He placed them on the grass before the tortoise. A moment later, the tortoise moved forward, slowly, thoughtfully, and began to eat. "Even the oldest ones must still be fed," Tupiniquim said. As the afternoon settled in, Tupiniquim led Aruanã to a circle of stones just beyond the clearing. There, in the filtered light, he began to prepare a small fire. From another pouch, he removed dried herbs. Some Aruanã recognized from earlier journeys, others he didn't. He placed them gently onto the coals, then lit the flame with a flint spark. The smoke rose in twisting ribbons. It smelled of bark, earth, and something sweet, like crushed petals. "Sit," Tupixa said. Aruanã sat. Tupixa began to hum. A low, steady sound, neither a song nor a chant. Just a vibration that seemed to come from the earth, through his chest and into the sky. "Close your eyes," he said softly. "Let the forest speak." Aruanã obeyed. He breathed in the smoke. It did not burn. It cooled. It slowed his thoughts. His heart, which had beaten quickly from the walk, began to follow the rhythm of the fire. He heard no words, only the soft crackle of the wood and the breath of the trees. Then, something strange. Not a voice but a feeling. Like being watched by something very old. Not in fear but in welcome. Images came unasked for. The ripple of a frog in a pond. A tree branch falling without wind. A tortoise crossing a forest path under moonlight. When Aruanã opened his eyes again, the sun had shifted. The tortoise was gone, moved deeper into the brush. Tupixa said nothing. He poured water onto the fire, and the smoke hissed and curled, then vanished. "You saw something," the elder said gently. Aruanã nodded. "I think I saw time." That night, they slept in hammocks made of woven vine, strung between two trees. The stars above blinked through the canopy in tiny silver patches. The forest was alive with sound, yet none of it disturbed Aruanã's rest. In the stillness he thought of the tortoise, not its shape but its slowness, its calm, its quiet certainty, and he realized something. In a world of rushing rivers, crashing waves, and flying birds, the tortoise moved like thought, carefully, with meaning. The next morning before they left, Tupixa handed Aruanã a smooth stone. It was flat, dark, and shaped almost like a turtle's shell. A white line ran across its surface like a path. "This is not for luck," the elder said. "It is for remembering." Aruanã tucked it into his bag. They turned back toward the trail, back into the trees. The forest closed gently behind them, leaving only the sound of footsteps and the slow, soft memory of something ancient, still watching from the shadows, still breathing, still there. By the time Aruanã reached the coast again, the air had changed. The forest thinned, and the wind carried the smell of salt, fish, and seaweed. Palm trees swayed lazily in the breeze, their long fronds brushing against one another like soft whispers. Above, the sky stretched wide and pale blue, dotted with seabirds gliding in long, slow circles. The path opened to a quiet inlet, where river met ocean, and there, nestled against the shore, was a village made of reed huts and sand-covered trails. Children played barefoot along the tide line. They chased crabs with long sticks and squealed with delight whenever their toes touched the cold foam of a breaking wave. Fishermen stood knee-deep in the water, pulling in large hand-woven nets while humming low, steady songs. This was the village of the tides. Aruanã was greeted by a woman named Cor, who smelled of smoked fish and sweet coconut oil. She wore a necklace of tiny white shells and walked with a basket balanced easily on her head. "You've come from the forest," she said gently, glancing at the dust on his legs. "I have," Aruanã nodded. "I came to learn how you fish." Cor smiled. "Then the tides must have called you." She led him past low homes built from driftwood and palm leaves, through a shallow lagoon where silvery fish darted just below the surface, and finally to a long wide stretch of beach where the sea breathed in and out, steady, calm, and eternal. The tide, Cor explained, is the ocean's heart. It beats twice a day. And then out. You must learn its rhythm before you cast a net. That evening Aruanã helped prepare the nets. They were made from long strands of plant fiber, braided by hand, not by knot. Cor showed him how to mend tiers, how to tie the weights, how to coil the rope so it wouldn't tangle when thrown. They worked slowly under a fading orange sky. Nearby, the elders told stories while cooking fish over a fire. Their voices rose and fell like the surf, soft and melodic. Someone began to drum quietly on a hollow gourd. Another added a low hum. As the first stars appeared, Cor handed Aruanã a cup of broth made from crab shells and herbs. It warms the belly before the cold night tide, she said. Aruanã drank. It tasted of salt, smoke, and something wild. Before dawn they rose. The sky was still dark, tinged with a deep blue that only came before sunrise. The moon hung low, casting a soft silver light across the water. The tide had pulled out, revealing wet sand and small tidal pools filled with tiny fish and sea snails. Cor and Aruanã walked into the shallows with a group of others. Men, women, even children. They worked as one body, setting nets in a long curve, then slowly tightening the line. Aruanã felt the tug of water against his legs. He listened to the steady breath of the sea. No one rushed. There was no shouting. Only the rustle of nets, the splash of feet, and the quiet encouragement passed from hand to hand. When the sun finally peeked over the horizon, they pulled in their catch. Not too much, just enough. Silver fish shimmered in the morning light, flipping gently in the woven mesh. Cor showed Aruanã how to sort them, keeping only what was needed and releasing the smallest ones back into the water. We never take more than we give, she said. The sea watches. They returned to shore. The fish were laid out to dry on flat stones. Some were wrapped in leaves for smoking. Others were cleaned and placed into baskets for the elders. Aruanã sat beside the fire and rubbed the salt from his hands. The warmth of the coals touched his skin. The scent of the ocean was everywhere, on his clothes, in his hair, deep in his chest. Later, Cor led him to a quiet cove hidden by large rocks. There the water was still like a mirror. Her husband, Mapua, stood with a long spear in hand, his eyes fixed on the shadows beneath the surface. He waits for the fish to come, Cor whispered. He doesn't chase. He watches. He lets them swim close and then... splash. In one quick motion, the spear darted forward and returned with a small, clean catch. Mapua smiled and handed the spear to Aruanã. Now you try. Aruanã stepped into the water. It was cool and wrapped around his legs like silk. He stood still as a tree. He watched. Tiny fish flicked past. A ray buried itself in the sand. Time slowed. And then he saw it. A flicker. A movement. He thrust the spear. The water rippled, but he had missed. Mapua only smiled. The sea is patient, he said. It teaches through waiting. That night, they feasted beneath a sky full of stars. Fish grilled over fire. Coconut cracked open. Plantains roasted and shared. No one counted time. They laughed softly, danced with bare feet in the sand. Children fell asleep to the sound of waves. Cor handed Aruanã a small necklace made of moon-shaped shells. For your journey, she said. A reminder that the tide always returns. Aruanã thanked her. As he lay down in a hammock stretched between two palms, The sea's rhythm filled his ears, rising, falling, rising again. The tide was steady. The people were steady. And Aruanã, for the first time in days, felt that his breath matched the ocean's own. He closed his eyes, the necklace warm against his chest. And just like the sea, he drifted. The sun rose soft and golden over the water as it always had. Waves whispered onto the shore. Birds sang overhead. Fishermen mended nets in quiet focus. Children ran along the beach, their feet kicking up little puffs of sand. But this morning Aruanã felt something different in the air. It was faint but present, like a low drumbeat just beneath the surface of silence. He stood with Kor at the water's edge, a basket of smoked fish in his arms, when a boy from the northern lookout ran down the shore, his eyes wide. "They're here," the boy gasped. "The boats? The tall boats." Kor's brow furrowed. She turned her eyes to the horizon, and there they were. At first Aruanã thought they were trees, strange trees drifting in the water. Then he saw how they moved not like canoes but like floating towers. Their sails were great white wings that billowed and shifted with the wind. The ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. Their shape was unfamiliar. Their purpose unknown. No sound came from them. No smoke. No voices. Just silent shapes, distant and slow, sliding toward the shore like ghosts. The villagers gathered on the beach in quiet clusters. No one spoke loudly. The children stopped laughing. The elders narrowed their eyes. "What are they?" Aruanã asked softly. "Strangers," said Mapua, appearing behind him. "From across the sea. Have they come before?" "Not like this." As the ships came closer, the people stepped back. Not out of fear but caution. Observation. They stood together in stillness, backs straight, eyes alert, watching with the patience of a forest animal sensing a distant thunder. From one of the boats, a smaller craft was lowered into the water. A handful of pale-skinned men climbed into it, wearing heavy clothes and carrying long sticks. Their hair was covered. Their faces unreadable. Aruanã noticed how they moved, not with the flow of the land but against it. Fast, clipped, and sharp. The boat bumped against the shore. The men stepped onto the sand. For a moment nothing happened. Then one of the villagers, an elder named Itagua, known for his steady voice, stepped forward. He carried no weapon, only a palm branch in his hand. He raised it slowly in greeting. One of the pale men mimicked the gesture awkwardly, lifting his hand. They did not speak the same words, but they stood in the same wind. And for a moment, there was peace. In the days that followed, the visitors remained on their ships, coming ashore only in small numbers. They brought gifts, glass beads, mirrors, metal tools. In return, the villagers offered fruit, smoked fish, woven baskets. Aruanã watched everything closely. He noticed how the strangers pointed at the land, how they measured things with ropes and marks, how they often whispered among themselves while smiling too widely. They seemed amazed by the forest, the food, the quiet beauty of the coast. But they did not seem to listen. Not the way Tupiniquim had listened to the tortoise. Not the way Kor listened to the tide. They were watchers, not learners. One afternoon, Aruanã sat on a high dune watching the ships. The sails fluttered like birds' wings. The wood creaked. The sun shimmered on the metal of their strange tools. Mapua joined him, silent for a while. Then he said, "They come with heavy shadows." Aruanã turned to him. "Do you think they mean harm?" "I don't know," Mapua answered honestly. "But I know they do not know our ways. And those who do not listen may break what they do not understand." He reached into a pouch and pulled out a carved fishhook made of bone. "This was my father's," he said. "He taught me that we are part of the tide. If we take too much, the tide pulls away. If we wait and share, the tide returns. He pressed the hook into Aruanã's palm. Remember that. A few nights later, as the moon rose over the quiet village, drums began to beat. Not in fear. In unity. The elders had called for a gathering. Not to fight. Not to flee. But to remember who they were. In the center of the village, fires were lit. Songs were sung in the old tongue. Body paint was brushed onto arms and faces with calm, steady hands. The people danced, not for the strangers but for their ancestors. For the earth. For the stars. Aruanã joined them. He moved with the rhythm he had felt since the forest. The rhythm of the canoe, the tide, the tortoise's breath. He felt the heartbeat of his people in the ground beneath his feet. The ships remained on the horizon. But in the circle of firelight, surrounded by songs older than any flag or map, Aruanã felt no fear. He felt history stretching behind him, and ahead. Whatever came, they would face it together. The next morning the tide was out. The ships were still there, anchored, watching. But the village was already awake. Children ran barefoot. Elders stoked fires. Nets were set. And Aruanã, standing beneath the palm trees, whispered quietly to himself, "We are not the first wind to blow here. And we will not be the last." The morning air was heavy with promise and quiet. Aruanã awoke to the familiar sounds of the village stirring. The soft laughter of children chasing each other through the palm groves, the rhythmic splash of hands pulling fish from the sea, and the distant murmur of elders speaking beneath the shade of the trees. But today was different. It was the day of the last dance before the storm, a day set aside by the elders not in fear but as a way to honor the rhythm of life, the memories of the past, and the strength that held the community together. As the sun climbed higher, villagers gathered in the center of the village, the ground worn smooth from generations of footsteps. Torches were lit, their flames flickering softly against the light breeze. Body paint of red, black, and white was carefully applied, symbols of protection, remembrance, and hope. Aruanã felt the familiar weight of the carved fishhook from Mapua pressed in his hand, a steady reminder of balance and respect. The music began. Soft at first, a single drumbeat, slow and steady like the heartbeat of the earth. Then another drum joined, followed by voices rising in unison. Songs told stories of the forest, the sea, the tortoise's patient steps, and the tides that gave and took away. The dancers moved with purpose, their feet beating a rhythm that echoed the slow march of time itself. Aruanã stepped into the circle, feeling the pulse beneath his feet. Each movement was deliberate, each breath measured. He remembered Tupiniquim's words from the forest, the value of listening to the old voices, the power in stillness. He remembered chorus lessons by the sea, the harmony in patience and respect. He remembered Mapua's carved hook, a symbol of care, not control. The dance was not just celebration, it was a promise. A promise that no matter what storms came, they would face them with grace, with strength, and with connection to the land and each other. As the day slowly faded into twilight, the village was alive with warmth and quiet power. The ships still rested beyond the horizon, their white sails ghostly in the dimming light. But the villagers did not watch them with fear. They watched with calm understanding. The world was changing, yes, but so was the tide. And just like the tortoise who remembers, just like the sea that flows in and out with endless patience, the people of the village of the tides carried a wisdom that no storm could erase. Aruanã lay back on a blanket of woven palm leaves, staring up through the canopy to the first stars. He felt the stone from Tupiniquim's pouch against his chest. He felt the necklace of shells from Kor, cool and smooth. He felt the carved fishhook from Mapua, steady and strong in his hand. And in the quiet darkness he understood. The story of his people was not just a tale of survival. It was a song of life, deep and unending. A rhythm to carry him gently through the night. The stars blinked softly. The waves whispered. The tortoise's slow breath seemed to echo somewhere just beyond the edge of sleep. And as Aruanã's eyes closed, his breath slowing and deepening, the land, the sea, and the sky sang a quiet lullaby. A lullaby for tomorrow. For hope. For peace. As Aruanã's story comes to a close, remember the steady rhythm of the tides, the patient breath of the tortoise, and the calm strength of the forest. Like the people of the village of the tides, you carry a deep wisdom inside you, a quiet song to guide you through any night. Allow your breath to slow, your body to soften, and your mind to float with the gentle waves of peace and rest. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. Sleep well, and when you wake, may you feel renewed, balanced, and ready for a new day. Good night.